There comes a moment no one talks about. Not the moment you win, not the moment they applaud, but the moment you realize it means nothing. You are sitting in a room, surrounded by smiles, nods, admiration. You have done everything they said you should. You are the dependable one, the successful one. But somewhere between the handshake and the forced laughter, you feel it, that silent, heavy pull inside your chest. Not sadness, not anger, something colder, something emptier, a flicker of truth trying to claw its way through the layers of performance. They say you are respected. They say you have made it, but you feel like a ghost wearing a costume no one questions. And the applause, the very thing you once chased, starts to sound like nails on glass. Because it was never for you. It was for the version of you that never said no. That showed up, smiled, obeyed, even when something inside was screaming. You don't remember the exact moment the mask fused to your face, but you remember the weight, the ache of always being on, the hollow victories, the crushing silence that followed every success. Everyone thinks rebellion starts with anger, but that's not true. Rebellion starts with erosion, 1,000 moments of pretending, 1,000 yeses you did not mean, 1,000 dreams you buried to be seen as responsible, until one day, you're sitting in the meeting, nodding again, but this time, you hear it. Not from the outside, from within. A whisper, a fracture, a realization that cuts deeper than any scream. This is not me. And in that moment, you're no longer confused. You're no longer chasing approval. You're waking up, and it terrifies you. Because you know once you see the mask, you can never unsee it. You get up, not with fire, not with fury, but with clarity. You walk away, not because you hate the world, but because you finally refuse to keep dying for it. And that's when the shift happens. Not outside, inside. The man who was always available disappears. The man who said yes to everything falls silent. The man who played the part drops the script, and the world notices, not with celebration, but with concern, with whispers, with fear. Because a man who no longer needs applause, it is dangerous. He can't be bribed. He can't be guilted. He can't be controlled. He has nothing to prove and everything to reclaim. This isn't burnout. This isn't failure. This is the collapse of the mask and the beginning of the most dangerous version of you the world has ever seen. You were never beaten into submission. You were praised into it. From the moment you were old enough to follow directions, you were rewarded, not for thinking, but for obeying. Good boy. 2 words that began the training. Sit still. Don't ask too many questions. Do as you're told. And when you did, they smiled, they clapped, they gave you gold stars, certificates, and approval. And somewhere, along the way, you started believing that being liked meant being right, that following rules meant you were good, that being obedient was a virtue. But here's the truth. You were not raised for freedom. You were raised for function. School did not teach you how to think. It taught you how to comply, how to memorize, repeat, recite, perform, but never how to challenge, question, or break the frame. Nietzsche called it the moral herd, a society that worships sameness, fears disruption, and devours the individual for the comfort of the collective. Carl Jung warned of the same thing, the persona, the false mask we wear to gain social acceptance, the role we are given so we never find out who we really are. And it does not stop at school. You carry that mask into the next level, a job that pays you for time, not truth, a marriage that rewards routine over honesty, a life that celebrates performance over purpose. You do well, you show up, you meet deadlines, you hit targets, you nod in meetings, you respond to emails with a smile, and they applaud you for it. They give you promotions, praise, and pats on the back. They call you a model man, productive, reliable, strong, but no one notices that beneath all the applause, you are quietly suffocating, because praise, when tied to obedience, becomes a leash. They don't need to control you. You will control yourself. To avoid losing the validation, that's the invisible trap, not built by failure, but by success. You followed the script perfectly, and that's exactly how you got trapped, in a life that looks perfect on paper and feels like a cage from the inside. You're not broken. You're just finally noticing the walls and realizing they were built out of compliments. You did not lose your freedom. You traded it, piece by piece, for acceptance. You became everything they told you to be, and nothing you were meant to be. And now, the applause is louder than ever. But the voice inside is whispering, you were not made for this. Not for the script, not for the checklist, not for the system. And when you finally stop mistaking praise for peace, the prison becomes visible, because when a man sees the bars, he's already halfway out. When you were asleep, everyone loved you. You smiled on cue. You showed up on time. You played your part with discipline, poise, and predictable charm. And they clapped, not because they knew you, but because you didn't disrupt the illusion. Then, something shifted, not all at once, but quietly, privately, like a whisper growing louder in the back of your mind. This isn't who I am. You couldn't unhear it, and you couldn't keep pretending, so you changed. You didn't make a speech, you didn't ask for permission, you just stopped lying. And that's when the applause died. The people who once celebrated you became silent, distant, uncomfortable. You thought truth would bring connection, but all it brought was tension and questions. Are you okay? You've changed. What's gotten into you? They didn't mean to hurt you. They were just scared, because your honesty felt like an attack, not on them, but on the version of themselves they had learned to protect. Carl Jung said, "Your awakened self threatens the sleeping shadow of others." You didn't become dangerous by choice. You became dangerous by presence, because when a man stops performing, he becomes a mirror, and most people would rather shatter the mirror than see what's staring back. You think walking away will be freeing, and in many ways, it is. But first, it's lonely. Because authenticity doesn't come with applause. It comes with exile. Your friends drift. Your family looks at you like you've gone off script. You're no longer motivated, ambitious, fun. You're intense. You're weird. You're too much. But all you've done is become real. You're not trying to wake anyone up. You're just no longer willing to live asleep. And that threatens everything they've built. You stopped pretending. They stopped clapping. Because your silence is too loud. Your clarity too confronting. Your peace too unfamiliar. And so, they label you. Not with hate, but with concern. With discomfort. You're selfish. You're lost. You're unstable. You're cold. But you're none of those things. You're simply done pretending. Done reciting the lines. Done living for a version of life that was never yours to begin with. They want you to come back, not because they miss you, but because your absence makes them question their own performance. Your departure isn't a rebellion, it's a disruption. You're not dangerous because you broke the rules. You're dangerous because you're no longer playing the game, and that makes you unpredictable, unmanageable, free. You didn't ask to become a threat, but in a world addicted to illusion, truth is threatening, and you are the truth they don't want to face. The man who doesn't need validation, the man who walks without applause, the man who wakes up and never goes back to sleep. Not all revolutions begin with fire. Some begin in silence. No arguments, no announcements, no dramatic exits, just stillness, and a man who quietly stops playing along. You don't slam the door. You don't burn bridges. You just stop showing up for a version of yourself that never felt real. You stop laughing at jokes that numb you. You stop chasing goals that hollow you. You stop proving yourself to people who never really saw you. You start saying less. You start watching more. You start walking slower. Not because you're lost, but because for the first time, you're choosing your direction. It confuses people. They don't know what to do with your stillness. They expect anger, rebellion, noise, but there's none. Just presence, just detachment. You weren't trying to win the game. You just realized you no longer want to play. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. You're not escaping life. You're escaping the lie. And that's what makes it powerful, because it's not performance. It's not a scene. It's real. They notice, but not in the way you hoped. They don't say, "You look at peace." They say things like, "You've changed. You're distant. You don't seem like yourself." But the truth is, for the first time, you are. This walk away, it costs you. You lose the crowd. You lose the comfort. You lose the illusion of belonging. Because once you stop acting, you realize most relationships were built on your performance, not your presence. You were liked for your availability, your obedience, your predictability. Take that away, and the invitations stop. The calls go quiet, the rooms grow colder. Not because you did something wrong, but because you did something rare. You told the truth through your absence. You refused to entertain the performance, and in doing so, you forced others to confront their own. People don't exile you with violence. They exile you with silence, with glances, with labels. He's unstable. He's selfish. He's going through something. Yes, you are. You're going through freedom. And freedom, at first, feels like exile, but only because we've been trained to believe that fitting in is survival. Here's the paradox. You walked away because you were dying inside, but now they treat you like you've gone crazy, because choosing peace in a world that profits from your performance looks like madness, but it's not. It's wisdom, it's maturity, it's sovereignty. The man who walks away, not with fists but with stillness, is not a coward. He's not confused. He's not lost. He's finally clear, finally grounded, finally real. And the world won't understand, because the system teaches obedience, not presence, reaction, not reflection, noise, not knowing. But you've left all that behind, not in rage, not in fear, but in quiet certainty. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are choosing yourself, and that is the most silent and the most powerful act of rebellion there is. There's a moment that doesn't come with fireworks, no audience, no announcement, just silence. And in that silence, something dies. Not your hope, not your dreams, but the version of you that was never truly alive, the version that smiled to be accepted, that stayed silent to keep peace, that said yes, while screaming no on the inside. That version is dying, and it feels like loss, because it is. You're losing your camouflage, your mask, your place in the moral herd. But here's the twist. The death of the false self is not the end. It's the beginning of your sovereignty. You're not becoming dangerous because you're violent. You're becoming dangerous because you're untouchable. The need for approval, gone. The addiction to applause, shattered. The thirst to belong, quiet now. Because once the false self collapses, what's left behind isn't chaos, it's clarity. You don't want to lie anymore, not even a little, not even to fit in, not even to feel safe. You've grieved the role, you've buried the image, and now you're standing in the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. Alone, maybe, but finally real. Carl Jung called it individuation, the sacred process of separating from the mask and integrating your shadow, your soul, your whole self. It's not pretty, it's not Instagrammable, it's not motivational, it's painful, ugly, ruthless, because you have to kill the man who sold his peace for permission. But in that death, something is born, a new man, one who doesn't flinch when misunderstood, one who doesn't explain himself to be accepted, one who doesn't bend just to stay liked. That's the danger, that's the threat, that's what society can't control. A man who no longer needs validation cannot be manipulated. You're not rebellious. You're awake. You're not angry. You're aligned. And that scares people, because most haven't even met their real self, let alone become him. But you walked through the fire. You faced the mirror. You felt the death and didn't run. You stayed. You watched it burn. And now you rise. Not louder, not tougher, just clearer. You're not trying to win anymore. You're not chasing the spotlight. You're not battling the system. You're just done pretending. That's what makes you dangerous. Not your words, not your actions, your being. The way you move without explanation. The way you sit in silence while others scramble to perform. The way you say no and mean it. You're not a rebel. You're just finally alive. And a man who has tasted the death of his false self can never be owned again. The system doesn't fear chaos. It fears questions. Not volume, but thought. Not anger, but reflection. Because the moment a man stops performing and starts thinking, he becomes dangerous. Why? Because a thinking man doesn't just live. He starts asking why. Why am I doing this? Why am I chasing this title? Why am I exhausted, respected, and still hollow? Why does obedience feel like security, but smell like death? And in a world built on silent agreements, questions are threats. You see, the system doesn't want you to collapse. It wants you to function efficiently, predictably, quietly. It wants you to keep smiling through the ache, showing up through the soul loss, nodding through the numbness. Because every man who obeys without asking keeps the illusion alive. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. It is better for a leader to be feared than loved if he cannot be both. But he also knew something else, that controlling thinkers was harder than controlling followers. You can bribe a man who wants applause. You can guilt a man who wants to fit in. But a man who only wants truth, you can't reach him. He's not loyal to reward. He's loyal to reality. So, how does the system deal with him? Not by arresting him, not by fighting him. It isolates him. It calls him too intense, too serious, too off. It smirks at his clarity. It labels his peace as detachment, his stillness as laziness, his refusal to comply as instability. But all he's done is think. That's the real rebellion, not in protest, but in perception. Because when you see the game, you stop playing. When you name the cage, you stop decorating it. When you understand the machinery, you stop pretending it's magic. The illusion of success, shattered. The illusion of stability, exposed. The illusion of purpose, questioned. And suddenly, you're not tired because you've failed. You're tired because you've finally seen. You realize success was a scoreboard designed by someone else. Stability was a leash dressed in gold. Purpose was a borrowed dream, repackaged as duty. And it hits you. The man who asks why is a threat to the man who never has. Because his presence alone reminds others that they've stopped asking. He doesn't need to speak. He doesn't need to argue. His clarity is a mirror, and that mirror breaks the illusion. So, yes, they fear him. Not because he's violent, not because he's disruptive, but because he sees, because he questions, because he doesn't flinch when others shiver in groupthink. He's not trying to destroy the system. He's just not belonging to it anymore. And in a world addicted to control, a free mind is the rarest and most terrifying force of all. People ask you if you'll come back to the path, back to the grind, back to the man they used to know. You smile because they don't understand. There is no going back, not because you're too proud, not because you're angry, but because you've seen too much. You've seen the cracks in the mask, the emptiness behind the title, the loneliness wrapped in applause. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Going back now would feel like spiritual suicide, like choosing a comfortable coffin over a difficult life, like volunteering for the slow death you already escaped. It's not that the old version of you was evil. He was necessary. He was the bridge. But he's gone now, and you can't crawl back into a skin that no longer fits. Yes, it would be easier to nod again, to smile again, to laugh at what isn't funny, to play along. But that ease has a price, and you've learned to count costs differently now. Before, you measured cost in money, status, approval. Now, you measure it in truth, in alignment, in peace. And by that measure, pretending is too expensive. You used to chase safety. Now you chase honesty, because the pain of staying became greater than the fear of leaving. And leaving, that wasn't rebellion. That was self-respect. You didn't walk away to prove a point. You walked away because the act of lying, to others, to yourself, to the world, started to hurt more than losing everything. That's the line most men never cross, the threshold of no return, where pretending becomes intolerable, and truth becomes non-negotiable. And truth, once awakened, is demanding. It costs you comfort. It costs you relationships. It costs you the illusion of being understood. But it gives you something else, a soul that no longer needs defending. You begin to see that authenticity isn't a feeling, it's a discipline. It's waking up every day and refusing to betray yourself, even if it means disappointing everyone else. You stop apologizing for your silence. You stop explaining your peace. You stop shrinking your clarity just to be accepted in blurry rooms. This doesn't make you holy. It makes you human again. You speak less, but when you do, it's real. You smile less, but when you do, it's honest. You do less, but what you do is yours. There are days you miss the comfort of blending in, of being liked, of being praised. But then you remember what it cost, and you know, what you gained in solitude is worth more than anything you lost in conformity. The door behind you is closed, not because someone locked it, but because you no longer wish to walk that way. You're not walking in reverse. You're walking forward towards something quieter, stranger, and finally, real. And when they ask you again, will you ever come back? You won't say no with your lips. You'll say it with your life. Because this is not about going back. It's about never pretending again that you were okay in the first place. He no longer raises his voice. He doesn't argue. He doesn't correct, convince, or convert. He just exists. And that's enough to make the world tremble, because his silence isn't empty. It's anchored. It doesn't seek attention. It radiates presence. There was a time when he needed to be seen, to be heard, to be understood. But that man is gone now. The man who remains doesn't need to prove anything. He knows what he walked away from. He knows what it cost. He knows what he reclaimed. And that knowledge makes him immovable, not arrogant, just unshakable. He sits in rooms full of noise and says nothing. But his stillness says more than all their shouting. Because stillness, when rooted in truth, is louder than chaos. People sense something in him. They feel it. Even if they can't explain it, they call it mystery, intensity, detachment. But it's none of those things. It's clarity. He is no longer playing a role, no longer wearing a mask, no longer reaching for applause. And that's what makes him dangerous, not because he's trying to be, but because he's finally free. A man who no longer needs the system is feared by those who still depend on it. He doesn't lead movements. He doesn't stand on stages. He doesn't write manifestos. He simply lives differently. And in doing so, he becomes something rare, a mirror. Not because he reflects who others are, but because he reflects what they've lost. When they look at him, they don't see rebellion. They see reminder of the man they once wanted to be, of the peace they abandoned for popularity, of the truth they buried for belonging. And they react, not with admiration, but with unease, because this man didn't yell, he didn't fight, he didn't resist, he just stopped needing them. No praise, no titles, no permission. And that's what makes him untouchable. Not because he's above the world, but because he no longer belongs to it. His power is quiet, but it shifts things. People watch him walk alone, and they feel something stir in themselves. Not envy, not judgment, but curiosity. Could I live like that too? And in that moment, without trying, without speaking, he plants a seed. This is the paradox. He did not become a leader by leading. He became a leader by leaving, and those who are ready won't follow his words. They will follow his walk, not to join him, but to find themselves. He is not a savior. He is not a hero. He is a man who stopped pretending, and that is enough. So when they ask, what did he destroy? The answer is nothing. He just stopped holding it up. And when they ask, what made him dangerous? The answer is not rebellion, or resistance, or rage. It's this: you did not become dangerous by breaking the system. You became dangerous by no longer needing it.